Alrighty, we are
Hello,
kicking this thing
hello.
off. Hello. All right, let's see the people hop in. Classic webinar. Hello.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone.
We're going to be building calendar and time related functionality today. So if everyone wants to say hello in the Zoom chat and make sure that your to setting is everyone, not just hosts and panelists, that'll
Yeah.
help us later, but throw a hello in there. Awesome.
Yeah, let us know where you're joining from as well. Always great to see. We'll give people a couple minutes to trickle in, and then we can go ahead and get started here in a minute. How are you feeling this morning, Alexis?
Great.
Yes.
Actually, I was telling Tim before we hopped on, I I slept wrong on my neck. So if you all see me making weird faces or just looking strange during the rest of this, you'll know it's because I cannot bend my neck to the right, but I'm doing
Yeah.
well, living the dream otherwise.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of
A lot of
shoulder twist turning, but that's okay. That is okay.
not what we'll learn today.
Yeah.
And you know what? I may even, let's see, we're only a minute in. How many folks do we have? Tim from San Francisco. We've got about 22 folks. I will throw up the slides as soon as you are ready for us to maybe even just sit there while other folks trickle in.
Sounds good.
Let me just pop
Yeah.
this up here. I will say for those joining, it is a great time. I'm perhaps will wait a second longer. I'm just going to keep dropping this in, but it is a great time to make sure you have all the assets that you need for this lab. And by that, what I'm going to say is that download this PRD. You should have gotten a Google Doc link beforehand. But let me just make sure I drop this one in. Oh, that link was fun. I suppose that works.
Oh
I'm going to
yeah,
hope that
here.
works. And at worst, I'm going to drop in our workshop guide. And what you're going to find here, if I actually hop in here, is that very same PRD that you can download directly from here. You're also going to have an attendee guide. And so for the attendee guide, if you want to follow along, if you want to copy and paste the prompts from here as we're going through the workshop, that's going to be handy for folks. So a couple of things, just make sure you've got this downloaded. You're welcome to do it from here. PDF is going to be convenient for dropping in. Don't feel like you need to do docs. And Imran, I'm not sure where you're getting the 403, so feel free to drop a little more context in there. Otherwise, let me just pop back over to here.
Cool.
Oh, for the CDN, and maybe, you know what? I think the URL got a little bit caught. Perhaps we ignore my link that I dropped in that was, unless Tim, yours looks better than mine. Maybe I'll just remove
Yeah, try the
mine.
one I sent her, or the larger guide that Alexa sent in Google Docs, and let us know if you still have any issues. Cool. Well, are we ready to get started, maybe, Alexis? People can kind of
Some
join in, and I think we'll have everything recorded and available after this as well. So,
Sounds good. And I know we've just hopped into saying hello. I'm going to pass to Tim to take us through the initial intro to this, but just quick introduction. I'm Alexis, based out of New Jersey, and I lead our solutions engineering team. And Tim, I'll throw over to you.
yeah, hey everyone, I'm Tim. I lead our technical success, so our post-sales customer engineering team here at Builder, working with our largest enterprise customers to get set up and utilizing Builder, successfully. So Alexis and I, between the two of us, have a lot of experience with using the Builder platform and agentic coding workflows. So really excited to be here today. Quick lay of the land. I will be giving about a 10-minute little intro to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page and understands what it is we do here at Builder and what it is we're working towards. And then we'll spend the majority of the time on our workshop. That's what everyone's here for. So, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, building an application from an idea from scratch in Builder. So really excited to spend bulk of the time there. And then, of course, we will have some time at the end for discussion. Throughout Feel free to post questions in the Slack channel. Like Alexa said, make sure to send it to all, and we'll do our best to try to get those answered and bring those up as we can. Yeah, why don't we go ahead and jump in? Cool. So everyone here is familiar, hopefully, with traditional software development lifecycle, right? The workflows that start with scoping, designing, building, reviewing, sending back, re-reviewing, re-scoping, redesigning, and eventually getting to the point where we can ship software to production, right? These workflows were designed in a world where writing code and delivering code output was the most expensive and time-consuming part of the software development lifecycle, and that's just not the case anymore, right? AI has turned that world upside down, and teams are operating and need to operate in a new way from what they were doing 2 years ago. But even 2 months ago, the world is changing so fast, right? um, we can go to the next slide. And none of these challenges, though, are new, right? So design handoffs lose intent. Teams are context switching between Figma, Slack, Jira, GitHub, all of the tools that your team has available. There's no shared source of truth. Review loops take days when they should be really taking minutes with AI. But now, what is new is that teams are still using this same flow, but they've started bolting AI into that broken process, right? So we're all using prototyping tools. We're all using agentic coding, IDEs or agent built apps. These are table stakes. But when you're adding those into an already broken or old, antiquated workflow, um, you're not fixing the workflow. You're just speeding up incremental parts of it. And so we're still hitting those same issues. The pitfalls don't go away, right? Um, and we have data behind this as well, right? So you can see AI is making coders and developers 26% faster, which is real and great. But a developer is only spending about 16% of their week actively developing and writing code, right? So what that means is, 15 to 25% of the software development idea to production timeline is actually active work. And the majority of what we do day to day is sprint planning, handoffs, approvals, getting, design reviews, content reviews. These review cycles are what's slowing everything down. And again, is based on a world where production code was the bottleneck, and that's just not true anymore, right? So we need to stop optimizing for coding and we need to optimize for everything else. Um, and so at Builder, we're really trying to take a different angle, right? So while most of the industry is talking around generative AI, making one person faster, right? Most of the AI tools that you see on the market are single player game, right? And at Builder, we're really focused on what we call collaborative AI. So we're speeding up the entire team, breaking down the walls between the roles, and letting people work in parallel at the same time in the same projects, and ideally in real production code together. So it's not just AI is helping a developer code faster, it's AI is moving the entire team together at a speed that was just completely inconceivable before AI workflows were available, right? And this is what this looks like in practice. So the current state, most people that we're talking to when we're out in the market, is that you have a developer using one agent. They're still the bottleneck. They're sped up significantly, but that interaction between the developer, the agent, the developer, and the rest of the team is still a significant bottleneck, right? Now, the market is moving, and most people are now adopting parallel multi-agentic flows, but they're still bottlenecked by developers, right? So, a developer has parallel workflows, work streams in progress, but design, PMs, QA, management aren't able to, tap into that in the same way. And so what we're pushing towards and what we're doing at Builder is everyone collaborating in parallel with the same fleet of agents all at once, right? So dev, PM, design, QA, everyone is working together without a bottleneck, no role gatekeeping, no handoff required, exactly where the work is taking place. So, you know, now instead of a sequence of de-escalations and handoffs, we're having a real-time, real code collaboration ladder, right? And this old world of build and submit and get feedback, revise, QA, file bugs, file feature requests, all of that was linear, slow, full of penalties. And now in the AI native way, we're iterating together from each version forward, right? So everyone is building off the idea in V1, V2, V3, V4, and forward, all at once at the same time, and everyone working together in the same platform on the same code. And we see this in our customers, but we've also embraced it at Builder. So since adopting these collaborative AI workflows at Builder, we have 3x our velocity, right? Our Builder agent is the number one contributor to our code base. And you can see that here significantly more than anyone else in the company, right? But what's great here is that it's democratized the output. It's not just from engineering. A lot of this is coming from designers, PMs, other developers, but we're all working in the same place, right? And we're all working where the conversation is happening. So we're not restricted to an IDE that is on a local developer's machine, right? We're working from Slack, directly from Jira, where the conversation is happening, so that planning is happening where your real world team works in practice. So we're able to go from idea to shippable code in minutes and not sprints, right? So you can see some examples of that here, but where you really start to see it take shape is out in the real world. So this is a snapshot of what it looks like in Builder in any given day. You can see myself in the corner. You see Alexis as well. We have basically everyone across our team is working directly in code. And in Slack, in Jira. There's no tickets, there's no sprint planning, no planning meetings. Everything is happening in real time collaboration across the team. So the work starts everywhere, and this is what it looks like in practice at Builder. And so that's where we're really trying to focus and shift the conversation, right? And that's what we want to do today. Now, today, obviously, we're going to be working individually on building things, but we'll also walk through some of our workflows on how you'll be able to share your prototypes with other teammates. And then we can also follow up with tons of content around our Slack and Jira agents and make sure to really leave with a sense of how collaboration can look in the AI first, workflow going forward. So that's my little spiel. Alexis, yeah, maybe you want to take it from here?
I will happily take it from here. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so hopefully that gave everybody a chance to get their two pre-work items out of the way. So if you haven't been paying attention to those so far, take a look at the Zoom chat, download the PRD as a PDF, and then make sure you can log into the Builder Space. Now, obviously, any sort of agentic workflow takes inputs and we get outputs out of it, right? And so for today's workshop, we have a target code base. We have a design system that we've integrated into that. We're using Material Design 3. We've got reference documents. So we've got that requirements doc around what we want to add to the product. And we have a design system index applied. So what that really means is that our Builder IO agent has a deep understanding of the component usage, of our design tokens, of how to interpret that when it's translating these product requirements into functional output. And what we're going to focus on today is both having a preview URL, getting a pull request out of this potentially, also using the handoff CLI. So it's actually something I should have highlighted here, but that's a way that we can collaborate more closely with, potentially our engineering team, if we're product managers who are putting out this enhancement to our existing app, or even potentially designers, right? Where we're helping product with the initial vision for how this product functionality should be built out. Now, first things first, we are going to get right into it. So hopefully everyone's got that PDF. I'm going to assume so because I keep mentioning it. So please get that PDF and log into your Builder account. On the right-hand side here, you're going to see what you should see once you access the Builder space. And I'm going to show you what it looks like on my side. You might need to double check your filters if you don't see any applications whatsoever. And let me just hop over here and I'm going to kick off this first step with you all. So here I am in the Builder space. If you don't see this project, you're not going to see the prompt box at the top. I should also say that. But if you don't see this project, double check your filters and make sure it's set to all projects. because we've got it kind of role constrained for the sake of the workshop because we had a lot of folks register. So you're not going to necessarily be able to create all the projects from scratch. You can do that in a personal space, but on this one, you should see this pre-created calendar app. And if anyone doesn't see that at this point, one thing I want to call out is just double check that you are in this Builder Workshops Idea to Application workshop space. Now, the initial step to just get this workshop rolling is to click New Branch. I'm seeing new branches get created, so that's awesome. I see Tim with a little red dot in the middle. Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
And
Oh,
I'm
fine.
going to click New Branch, and everyone should be seeing what I'm seeing. If you're not seeing this, please flag it in the chat, or if you have questions, even philosophically, theoretically, like why are we doing this? What's happening in the background? What's happening in the foreground? Please feel free to put those into the question and answer, the Q&A feature of Zoom. And whenever there's loading, whenever there's kind of downtime in between the agent acting on our prompts, we can get to those questions as well. Now, my app has been created. I'm going to take a quick look at the Zoom chat. Let's see.
Yeah, I
Nice.
relinked the PRD in case I know
Perfect.
there's a couple other links that might have not worked, but if you're still having issues, definitely let me know.
And everyone should hopefully be seeing at this point that we've got this calendar application. There's different work events. It is functional, right? So we can navigate throughout it. We have this sidebar that we can minimize, a couple of different options here, right? So just want to double check that everyone is at least initially seeing this calendar application, and then we'll go from there once I get a few more checks. Unable to create branch, I checked filter also. I would double check if you, okay, I see some starting dev server.
Yeah,
Unable to
the
create a
dev server
branch,
can
yeah.
take a minute to get up and running. So I can check a lock and see like that you have access.
One thing we should call out at this point too is that if you are using your corporate device, there is a domain allow list that typically for VPNs or different IT setups, you might need to access Builder through your corporate network. So, just want to call out that thing that if you're having any troubles and you're using your corporate device, that may be an issue. But please flag if anyone is unable to see that. And I'll just leave us here for maybe another minute to try to get as many folks as we can on this new branch setup. VPN does interfere often if the domains that we use for our API requests are not allowed listed. Okay, using personal computer, that's good. And if we do need, I mean, I'm taking a look at the attendees. We don't have a ton of attendees, so if we need to, we can always potentially, I was gonna say flipping screen sharing is a little hard during a webinar, but if you can drop screenshots into the Zoom chat, we can also help from that perspective as well.
Yeah, and if you're having issues, feel free to DM me your email, and I can make sure to that you have the right access as well.
For those that are getting their branches loading, I do want to go ahead and give us the first prompt. So this one shouldn't take forever to run. If you've done any of our webinars in the past, sometimes I start you all off on a pretty hefty initial prompt. This is just a kind of, not quick one, but a functionality addition to give us some fun drag and drop functionality to the calendar view. One thing I want to call out is while this prompt runs, it is super handy if you rename your branch in the upper left to something unique. So that can be workshop slash Alexis for me, or workshop slash Tim. This just makes it much easier to find in case you get disconnected. Or if we're going to hop amongst different branches, what you'll see on this left-hand side is that I'm going to be able to hop between everyone's branches and we can kind of debug together or look at what people are creating together, right? So I'm going to go ahead and change mine right now. Let me hide that branches view. Let's do workshop Alexis for mine. And then for the ease of doing this prompt, let me actually hop into our workshop guide, and maybe Tim can be my helper in dropping the prompts into the Zoom chat as we go along, but I will paste this into our Zoom chat, and everyone is welcome to follow along with this workshop guide, or if you're able to copy and paste from the Zoom chat, we'll make sure we get those prompts in there too. All right, so let's get that first prompt running. And hopefully this will give everyone a chance to get to the same spot as we're in. Now, a couple of cool things I'll call out. They're happening on the left, of course, with, Any AI tool, we have the agent who's taking in that context and then trying to interpret and translate that into the output. We have a design system index applied to this repo, as I was mentioning earlier. So we're going to see specifically the design system being read for this change. It's going to use our components. We can always inspect that. So if anyone on this call is a bit more technical, we can go into the code mode. We can take a look at what's actually being generated as a diff against the actual application code base. But we can also just see how is the agent thinking about that prompt that we put in here. And often, when I'm working with an agent, I really do like to understand, like, how did it interpret what I said? Did it misinterpret it? We're going to get into playing with the way that the agent interprets our functionality requests and our prompts a lot more in the plan mode. That's our next exercise, but just kind of an initial point where if something turns out differently than you expect, I always encourage people to both question the agent and take a look at, like, where could the thinking have gone wrong? Because that's
Yeah.
where we can kind of course correct there.
Yeah, I kind of have this mental model of the builder agent as, a developer on my team. Who, you can ask why they made a decision. You work with them, say like, make sure to follow. If they don't follow some internal guidelines, you can use, rules or um, agents MD files to update. But it's really helpful to kind of interact with it. It's not just, a one-shot thing. It's a tool. It's a partner that you can work with, which is really helpful.
Dropped a little bit of a just first check there into the chat.
Yeah, and someone Ash mentioned the first prompt also renames the app name. So the app it will try to name branches off of like what the features and functionality are. So sometimes that can happen for sure. Uh, but if you overwrite it, it should be able to persist.
There was a period of time where we had branches that were getting named the random unique identifiers like silly aardvark. And very quickly, ourselves internally and our prospects and customers said, hey, it'd be nice if it used the logic of the change it was working on when it was giving you this branch name description. All right, cool. So mine is iterating, so I can see that's starting to output code. We don't have to worry too much about it, right? I know I've gotten questions from people before the workshops where they say, "Hey, do I need to understand, whatever framework we're developing it in order to be able to do this workshop?" You don't have to, right? It can be helpful for validating the output quality, and that's that code mode inspection I was talking about earlier. But if you're happy with the functionality that's coming across, really we can just let it run, do its thing. And then the collaboration portion with our engineering team, with our devs, that's really where we can kind of tie in that code quality check and make sure it's adhering to the rules, the output standards that we want. All right. So I have got a little summary. I think, let's see, it's got its approach. Okay, cool. And now it's just documenting it in my rules. So we'll let it finish there. We'll test the functionality. And if everything looks good, we'll move on to the next exercise, pending everyone else kind of getting to that same point. All right, it is live. So let me go ahead and give mine a try. It looks like it reloaded. Sweet. Okay, so I can move around my events now. I can make yoga at 9 a.m. I really do not do things before 9 a.m. So I am going to drag my things down because I am a lazy East Coast in the States, non-morning person. But anyway, I hope everyone else is getting to this point. So let's take a look and see. Okay, I see people at the thinking phase. Maybe thumbs up, or I was gonna say, even drop a comment into the Zoom chat if you're getting to the drag and drop functionality being complete on your side, just so we can get a gut check for where people are at in the workshop. Complete, complete, cool.
Right. This is
And
also,
people, yeah.
I was just going to say while it's working and thinking, you know, that's where we go back to that parallel agent. Sometimes I find myself working on multiple projects at once and kind of like orchestrating them. What's really great, Builder has like it's like a kitchen timer sounding when the agent is done, which I've gotten very used to hearing in my house. So that's always something to help, uh, you know, keep things, when to let you know when things are working through or completed, which is great.
For those who are done, I'm going to flash the second prompt for interact mode, and this will be the last one we do in this exercise before we move into plan mode. But this is one where you should get questions and actually should be a lot more interactive with the agent in terms of what you want to implement. We should also start to take some differing paths here, right? Everyone's on their own, choose your own adventure, especially when we work in the non-deterministic world of AI. So all this to say, I will take I'll take the prompt, I'll drop it into the Zoom chat, and I'm also going to paste it in for myself unless anyone else has done this so far. Also, I'll just put it out there that if folks are working from the workshop guide and you're moving ahead, that's totally fine. You don't necessarily need to keep pace with us, but please feel free to keep dropping stuff in and let us know where you rise. Okay, so let me drop that. Oops, and I did that before I even passed it to everyone else. So there's the prompt. I just dropped that into our Zoom chat. Someone got the ding. Tim loves the ding. I gotta say, I work on a lot of projects at the same time, and the ding slowly drove me up the wall. I experimented with changing the sound, and then I turned it off entirely, and I will live in the world of silence.
I like it because sometimes I'll get up and then, I'll get my coffee and I'm like, oh, time to go back, which can be great. I also know Diogo mentioned, I'd love to understand about the multiple agents. So honestly, like if you have multiple branches, that's multiple agents. So just multiple instances of working within the same application, or let's say you have multiple projects and applications you're working on. If you set up multiple branches, one for each kind of feature or exploration or prototype that you're working on, those will all show up. You can even see in the left hand, there's a little Alexis, maybe click on that the branches UI on the left nav and you'll be able to see, okay, these are all the branches that are in progress, and you can kind of click in. And obviously, this is for everyone in the in our webinar now, but you'd be able to, let's say you have multiple projects, you could filter by the ones you're working on and do that. So.
Sweet. Look, Razes, I see. I'm not sure if you got your drag and drop functionality working. We're collaborating technically on the same branch right now, which is why I can creepily see where your icon is and kind of what you're looking at. If you answer one of these questions, then I'll be able to see it as well. And then we can also see on the right-hand side, okay, if the drag and drop functionality isn't working. So if anyone does want to debug in this way, or if there are things you're seeing and we can work on together, I'm happy to drop into those branches. I'm going to find mine again. Now it's just convenient because I saw your comment in the Slack or in the Slack in the Zoom. I myself have questions on what I want to implement. So for me, it looks like based on what we have in our design system, I can do, let's see, place the sidebar text button, filter chips, tabs, or bomb navigator. Ooh, I think I am going to do I like the filter chips. I'm going to do that one. And if you want, I'll say, folks here, feel free to drop in other, describe something you want to see here from the agent. It doesn't have to just be the options it gives you. It's just trying to do that research for us initially, right? Like what's high impact? What uses the design system components that we have available to us today? And one thing I may even show while we're talking through this for anyone who's interested, I'm just going to pop open a new tab and we'll drag this over here. We keep talking about this design system index. There's been a couple of questions about it. This is the design system we're using right here. I just have one index installed within this space. You can have many. In my demo space that I use here, I probably have 30 different design systems, different versions of them. And when I click into this, what you actually see, and let me just go to the index file. This is kind of the entry point into a design system. And this is created by our platform, by our agent. It's essentially LLM friendly documentation about using a design system. And it also helps the LLM be more adherent towards the components, the tokens, the patterns, all that sort of usage goodness that we need in order to properly use our design system right. If you're thinking like, oh, it kind of sounds like Storybook, it kind of sounds like something we've created internally, it can. It's just, it's very LLM focused. And so, you'll see that the agent has created these rules for itself where it's like, hey, if I'm looking for a component, this is the structure. Here's the different components I have available to me. So if Alexa is like, I want a button and I think I want it filled and blah, 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 it's probably going to look at this because it has the context of that, right? And then for specific components, like let's just go that filled button specifically. We get the actual usage examples, what parameters are available to us. And these are just things the agent has available to it, right? So it's part of that preloaded understanding of how it can use this design system. And that's what we're using for the workshop as well, right? So when you ask that question to the agent, like, hey, what's high impact? What uses my design system? It did a quick scan of all the components that it knows it has available to it, and then tried to map that to like high impact functionality based on what we had available to us within the app existing. That was a lot of words. I will take a breath. I will pause there. I think mine just completed. So let's see. I'm going to be honest. It was not the prettiest change in the world. And I might even tell it to make it prettier, but I got what I asked for. Um, Hopefully, other folks are seeing some cool stuff. I would love to know, does anyone have a branch that has something cool in it based on what they prompted on that one? I'd love to flip to other folks as well. One thing I do want to call out, I see a couple of questions here. So Figma is not necessarily code based, right? It is JSON based. Of course, you have layers, you have hierarchies, you have Figma component libraries. But what we attach to is the actual source of truth for us, which is code, the component library code. We work with teams where they build out the component library in code using their Figma design files. And then what they'll do is create a design system index as they're building out the actual code component library and builder. But the Figma design system is not going to be that source of truth for us because JSON just isn't equivalent to code for us in the same way, right? So hopefully that makes sense. If anyone's asking there, Tim, please feel free to translate me into more thorough
Mhm.
answers or anything else you'd throw in there.
No, sounds great.
Okay, let's check this out. I like the ghost preview.
Oh,
I'm gonna
nice.
check out your branch. Is your branch? Can you drop me a name, Rakesh? Which, oh, it's probably Workshop Rakesh. That would be super simple. Thank you for naming it in a way. Okay, so I can check out next week's event with the ghost. Let's see. Oh, I see on the bottom of the screen. That's super interesting. I actually really like that. Your little ghost calendar. Okay, that's cool. Did anyone else get something different or kind of unique? Dark mode toggle. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Imran, where is your branch? I'd love to take a look at the dark mode toggle as well. Let's see if I can find original league. You know what? It may have been renamed at this point to something a little more based on this. So we will definitely find yours at some point if you want to take a look at whatever name is right here. But the dark mode toggle is honestly a really good functionality add if anyone else is looking for stuff to prompt at this point. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us into plan mode because we tend to spend a little bit of time here. So this is where we're actually going to drop in that PRD, that document you downloaded. This is where we're going to do a little bit more hefty functionality, right? So what we have in the PRD, if anyone wants to take a look, is authentication, user profile management. And so for this one, I'm going to go into, let's go back into MySpace. I won't do this on someone who doesn't want me to. There's Alexis, there's Alexis. And we're going to attach that PRD. So let me upload the file. We got this in our downloads. And then our prompt is simply, for this one, use the attached PRD to help me plan out the off feature. Now, one important thing before you click this, if you do not switch to plan mode, Builder is just going to build it based on what it sees in the doc, based on what you have in your prompt. I want you all to click plan because I want you to take a look at the way the agent plans to execute this functionality. And if you don't agree with the approach, if you want to see something different, and for the sake of the workshop, right? Like this isn't your production code base. We can have some fun. Feel free to give it feedback, right? Like let's change it up a little bit. So I have mine kicked off here. I am in plan mode. I will flip back to the slides just to kind of show. I think my GIF here does a really good job of kind of showing like this is what you want to change to be in
Mhm.
plan mode versus build mode.
Yeah. I think I was kind of slow to pick up plan mode personally, and now it's kind of my entry point for any project I'm working on. I think it helps me process my thoughts, which is really great. And it also it's more effective use of like tokens because instead of building things and then removing them and having to rework them, you're actually fleshing out your ideas up front, which is really, really helpful. So I know a lot of a lot of times that I'm using Builder, especially when I don't have a full picture of what I want to do, plan mode is really where I'll start. Another thing, this actually, I was talking to colleague of mine yesterday, and I thought this was a great idea. There's oftentimes when we're like working on a new feature and it'll spark an idea of something else we want to work on, but generally you want branches to be kind of unique. And so what he does is he'll go into plan mode, have it build a plan for this other feature idea he has, and then save that down to put into a new branch to start later, so that he doesn't kind of lose that thought process, but keeps branches, scoped to individual features, which is generally like a good practice. So there's a lot of kind of interesting ways you can use the plan mode for sure.
Gonna take a quick look at mine. Hopefully everyone's kicked theirs off at this point. Okay, I think my plan is almost done. Plan mode, basically what's doing here, in case, we keep saying plan mode, it's going to create a markdown file and it's going to outline the strategy. It'll tell us a little summary of the strategy on the left-hand side, and we could just open that up and get kind of the full view of the way that plans to actually make this change, right? So I've got one clarifying question before I get my plan handed to me. Let's see what it says. You know what? I've played with this where I've had it make me sign in every time. And that is a quick way to insanity if you always have to sign in upon starting your prototype app. So I'm going to start signed in rather than signed out for the sake of the workshop today. But everyone, please feel free to choose your own adventure, as we said earlier. And then let's see how my plan looks. Okay. So we've got this based on that. My prompt was very basic, so I really didn't add too much more context there. For this one, we're kind of mocking it up at this point because we haven't necessarily hooked into potentially whatever backend service our dev team wants us to use, like an Auth0, an Okta, an Intra, whatever we're doing there, right? So right now, we've got a couple of seed accounts. Maybe what I will say, okay, start signed in. You know what? I could give it feedback. I think for the sake of time, I'm happy enough with this. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, yeah, let's implement the plan. I had a bunch of like priorities and hey, these are things that we want the prototype to cover, that we need the functionality to cover. We must have an avatar, name, and email. That's great. And if you love kind of talking product, PRD, how your team assembles them, I'd love to hear more about it. But for this one, I'm just going to let it roll based on what we've already created, researched, and assembled
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah. And it's also, as you know, when AI LLMs are non-deterministic, it depends on how much context you give it. Like a PRD that we provided also has a lot more structure, but if you really want to kind of explore and be a little more, freewheeling, open to outcomes, like there's, if you come in with a less precise prompt, it'll kind of run wild. And the more precise prompt, the more context you give is going to direct it in the direction you want to go. Which, there's value to both, but especially, for these production development, software development life cycles, I think having more more context and direction can generally be helpful, which is good. And like I said, that plan mode is just a markdown file, so you can just save it and do, whatever. It's added as a file in this code. So if you share the preview of this, your team can come in and review it together, edit it together. Again, going back to those collaboration workflows.
We've got one question in the chat. Maybe we can answer that one really quickly. So the system design files, will these love tokens? So actually, one thing that I have noticed, and I'm trying to think if we even have anything publicly like documentation on this. If you have that design index, it's actually guiding the agent and scoping it in terms of how it's going to use the design system. So that can actually help you be
Mhm.
more what's the right way to say it, like token efficient
Yeah,
than if the agent has to investigate everything at the start of every prompt because you haven't incorporated the design system index, right? And so it's one thing that we built into the product to intentionally help guide
yeah.
the agent in most quickly and performantly and uh, I don't know, cost effectively using that design system context. And then to add it to any project, I can show you all the settings that we apply it. Basically, you have the design system in your code base, and then you just apply the index and the builder side in the project settings. And I can totally walk us through that too. Um, maybe Let me see if this looks good. I might be finishing off my PRD. The next time we have a downtime, I'll go through some of the project settings and we can talk about that.
Yeah, and we have a number, we definitely have documentation, and we do have some case studies in our on our marketing hub. We have some case studies of how Builder is using it, as well as some of our other customers. So um, definitely check those out.
So I'm checking mine now. So I'm just going to do a quick functionality check after mine completed so we can see if everything's working okay. Okay, I've switched from AC company account to AC personal. I see my user avatar switched. Let me see if I have settings. My settings are right there in the settings bar, not super advanced. Might be interesting to like build out the user profile functionality. And then I see here, I can get to my sign in, right? So I click sign out. Now maybe I'm going to select, hey, I'm going to use my corporate login. We get back in as this user. So it's a little bit, still of a mock-up for the sake of getting through that in the course of this workshop. But if we wanted to use plan mode and kind of investigate actually integrating the right SDK for a third-party provider, for SIAM, for, SSO, we could totally take that as a next step here, right? Um,
Well,
any
and if you're
questions?
if you're
Yeah.
integrated into your live code base, right? This is a kind of a template app, but if you were integrated in your actual application, it would be using, your auth provider, your auth patterns, your components inherently. So uh, it- yeah, it should be kind of baked into the process already.
And I think you had probably said this, Tim, but where's Tim? Sorry. Tim said this to Tim. Tim had a great question in the Zoom chat. Tim, other G, Tim G answered it, but I think as follow-up, we can definitely send some of those over. Thank you, Tim G's. All right. I am going to bump us forward one more. Please keep playing with the plan mode if y'all are having fun doing stuff there. These next couple of ones I'm going to hit on pretty quickly. And if you want to follow along, please do. These are often of use maybe to folks who prefer like pixel perfect editing or like clicking on an item. I will say, so for design mode, one really handy thing is that, okay, let me go to the style tab and I'll show you all this. We can select different elements and then we can make it so our prompts are only applying essentially to the context of that element, which in essence, like maybe I click this button, right? And I go down and I'm like, you know what? This button is not very visually apparent. So let me just click this random generic blue color. It is not my design token blue color, right? But when I say make this button more visually, I don't know, let's say more visually appealing, it's pretty bland right now. Builder's actually going to use my design tokens to do that. It's not going to use that generic blue that I just clicked on in the color palette. So, you can play with stuff like that. You should see the actual design tokens get used instead of, just the generic things, unless you explicitly say, like, give me that exact generic blue. I want that, not my design token, right? Like, that's a way that we can technically overrule some of what the agent considers what we'd likely want here. But you can do these kind of like specific. There we go. Hey, we've got that. We can do these specific selections of elements where maybe like I'm saying up here, um, make this more visual. I don't know, make this bolder. We can select specific elements as kind of the end all be all using that little icon down here or using style mode. And so just kind of a fun thing that you can do, a fun thing to say. Yeah, if you like that kind of editing style, you're welcome to use that. The other thing that I like to call out, let me just go back in here, is that, please feel free to select it. Please feel free to stay in design mode. Collaboration is obviously a big thing that we were saying earlier. And so far, the most collaboration I've done is kind of hop amongst different branches, take a look at what folks are doing. But I'm going to pull Tim into my branch at this point, and I'm going to make him review it for me. And this is kind of the start of the collaboration journey, right? So if I go back into mine, and you'll notice that we have this share and this review button up here. Now, sharing is where I can actually copy this preview URL and then I can share it with different stakeholders, right? So I can say, hey, check out my prototype. Mine is going to be slightly different than all of yours, right? You all can drop your prototype link into here. I think I may even have a call out for that, to be honest, if I'm talking about my next. Oh, yeah, that was the call out on here. You can copy this preview URL and drop it in. The other part that we can do to kind of enhance collaboration is actually request review from folks. And so maybe what we need before ever opening up a pull request, if we're going to be a team that opens up PRs from Builder, is we need to get an admin approval or we need to get specific folks who are going to review it for me. So I'm going to call up Tim, and maybe I'll also, add just a little branch description here to be like, check out my new flow, like the general idea. We can hook it up to Auth0 later. I'm a former Auth0 person, so you'll notice a little bit of my bias there. So, hey, check this out, Tim. He's going to get an email. He's going to get a notification. He can come in here and he can actually approve it or reject it and leave feedback for me on what he wants to see before I can push this any further. Maybe he's going to take a look at the code and say, hey, Alexis, overall, this diff makes a lot of sense to me. Like I can see you're using all the components that I would expect you to be using from here. Or, it's not just building nonsense into this, but I have some other feedback for you, right? So there's different things we can do there at that review point. The last thing that I want to show while we're talking collaboration, right? Like these different workflows is actually the way, if I hop back into code mode, and please excuse me for doing a little bit of hopping back and forth, you'll notice that I have, hey, Tim's in my branch. I have this edit locally section down here. And this is where we can get a handoff CLI, where we can pass this to our dev team, and then they can put this into their preferred local workflow, right? So maybe your devs are using Cursor, Cloud Code. Maybe your devs are working in GitHub Copilot, VS Code, whatever their preferred flavor of working locally is. I can click push to remote. What this means is essence. It's just we're creating a remote branch that we can all collaborate on. So they can push changes to me. I'm going to see them in here in real time. Now, if I run this command, and let me actually show you all this because I do have it pulled up. I'm going to share my screen on something slightly different for a second. Maybe I'm a local dev, right? And I'm like, hey, I'm going to pull in this command that Alexis just gave me, and I'm going to load whatever she was working on in my local instance. So, hey, here I am loading in my terminal. Alexis apparently failed to fetch the project because she maybe broke her NPX basic package. But assuming that I actually had that working the way I wanted to, which is a me problem, so we'll just forgive that one. We could pull that in locally and we could actually have that be running within our IDE or just, within terminal, depending on the way we work there. So super, super quick jump through of those different items. You all should be able to do this within your branches if you want to. Um, Hop forward one in our idea to application workshop, just because that's where we kind of get off to like the Cinta engineering point. So if anyone's comfortable working locally or is technical or is an engineer on this call, feel free to grab that handoff CLI, work on stuff locally and work on pushing items back. I'll take a breath. Tim, anything I missed?
Yeah, Jessica was asking about comments. So if you go back to the
Oh
in
yeah, let's
Builder
hop back in.
directly, you can see we have a comments tab where the reviewer comments will show up. So you can see I approved here, but you know this is where you can leave comments and collaborate on the team. And then yeah, going back to that collaboration, anyone in your team should be able to access this. So developers, designers, PMs can come in, give feedback, change things directly. It's all kind of up to how you want to set up that workflow. But again, it's all happening in real time together. So
Any other questions on that point? I'm aware we're popping up at the top of the hour. Technically, we're pretty much on track for where we want to be at this point, but I'd love to know if anyone in their branches has created anything super cool that we can take a look at. Or, oh, I see dark mode. Maybe this was the one we were looking at earlier for Rakesh. Whoa,
oh,
whoever
nice.
did this, this is this is a visual treat. Wow,
Very
that is
cool.
fascinating.
Retro.
Um, Very cool. Yeah, anyone else have cool stuff they've worked on in their branches? Oh yeah, your branch has sparkles. And what's fun? We can be like, how did we get sparkles on the branch? If you look at the history tab, you can go back here and see like, oh my gosh, like how did they request in order to get this? I would like to add stars to the background. Here's an image with inspiration. Like that's awesome to understand how people use the context to get the output that you're seeing here. Anyone else have a branch we can check out? Tim needs this calendar. Yes. All Tim G's on this call need this calendar. All Alexis's on
Agreed.
this call need this calendar.
Agreed.
Let me hop back to mine. Mine seems so dull and bland compared to yours now that I don't have sparkles. Part of me wants to use plan mode to be like, find the most over the top way to add sparkles and glitter to my
Yeah.
calendar, but that's for after this call. Um, all right. Really, at this point, we're kind of on the discussion side. I mean, please feel free to keep playing on your branches. There's a couple of things that we usually like to just throw out there. I mean, obviously, as we're hopping between the branches right now, it's interesting to see like how did your application differ from others? We can hop amongst the different branches, right? So we can see where did people's functionality overlap and where did it change? Was some of that just the way that the agent interpreted the prompts differently? Was some of that us telling it like, I would like more glitter, please? I mean, it's very interesting to interrogate. Yeah, where's the difference that we get with these results? And I think that's really applicable to the way we're all probably using AI in our day jobs right now, too, right? The second thing that I'd love to hear people's opinions on, too, if you want to even drop it into the Zoom chat, is just what tasks felt easier with the AI. If you do any similar, maybe development or product or design workflows in your day by day job, which didn't. And there's certain things like potentially you say, hey, it would have been easier for me to go into like the code mode and edit CSS or edit something directly, maybe edit the text directly. I know exactly where it is. That's faster for me. I don't know. I don't need AI to do that. But maybe some bigger items like integrating an auth provider, it's like, you know what? It's kind of nice to leave that on a branch, let it plan out the method, and then I'll come back and tell if it's right or wrong. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, always love to read those. I won't go through the rest of these necessarily. I mean, I think they all kind of get into that same theme, right? Of just being thoughtful and intentional as we think about the ways that we can collaborate with the tools we have available to us. There's a lot of tools in the market today, right? And I think we're all using a smattering of these. So just being intentional about the way we combine them and what's still human and what's helpful to have an AI help us with. So that's the end all be all on kind of the comparing notes. I'm going to take a quick look at our chat. Always more glitter. Yes. You can use Builder.io to reverse engineer a design system. I would love to learn more about that use case, to be honest. I was going to say that kind of challenge or problem is always interesting to me. I think that we've probably reverse engineered certain design systems for our demos here that we've given. I know that we've reskinned several, or we've used like Figma component libraries to build out the corresponding code component. So the answer is yes. The specifics may vary based on what you're thinking.
Yeah, we've seen customers. I mean, you can always use public design systems as well. We had one customer who was planning to do an entire design system, overhaul and was having to build all these components. Instead, they had all their PRDs that they had written up for what all these components should look like and how they differ from the previous design system, popped it into Builder, and it was able to set up pretty much 90%, 95% of their new design system in just a couple, prompts, which was really cool. So there's definitely a lot of stuff that you can do there.
There's a couple of really good questions here. I will answer quickly. And I also remember I promised someone I would show project settings, and this ties into three of the answers. Sorry, three of the questions folks said. So does Builder provide a like GitHub org out of the box? We don't, but you can use, if you're using a personal GitHub account, you can use that to connect repo for our enterprise customers. I mean, we've got folks who are using self-hosted, on-prem, ADO, GitLab, Bitbucket, enterprise GitHub servers, right? So all of those are possibilities as well. But if you have a personal account because you signed up to do this workshop, you can totally connect to github.com repo, or you can push whatever you're working on to github.com through your personal github.com org, right? So as long as that works for you workflow wise, we don't need anything super special there. Now, let's see, there was a question around mobile apps. So you can use our CLI for outputting code in mobile apps, especially if you want to work even CLI only, like within an IDE. That's where we see a lot of native designers working. But
Mhm.
there is interesting developments where, anyway, I'll probably stop there. Stay tuned for more. um, and what was I going to say? Just looking at a few more things here. Oh, and I still didn't show project settings. Okay, the last thing I'll say before I pause, and maybe Tim, you can help me with a couple more questions during
Mhm.
Q&A, but project settings is where I mentioned like how we can apply a design system index. This is where I've got the design system index applied. And so you'll see here, like all it is that I have this code base, it's using Material Design 3. And then for Builder to know that it can use that documentation, and it should, I applied that index here. Now you'll notice that I can put multiple design systems on this. So one use case that I actually talk to folks about more commonly than you would think is like, we are migrating from one version to a newer version, or from one design system to another design system. Guess what? If you have both in your code base, use the indexes and let Builder use the context of what one is versus the other, and where there might be gaps that exist, or if it needs to create new components to make up for components that did or do not exist in the legacy design system. That context can be super handy. So this is kind of the important setting for that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes, and I mean, there's a lot of settings here. You can really, get down to nitty gritty depending on what exactly your team wants to set up. I know Imran had a question. Any more planned sessions in the future? Yes, definitely. This is going to be a series that we'll be doing. Um, some with similar content, some with new content. So, stay tuned for that. Jessica was asking, so if we're working on a branch or feature and Tim is working on another feature on another branch within the same product, I'm assuming the engineer picks this up as a local file. They'll be able to pull the build and build the two features into one product. Yes. So when you create a branch in Builder, it's very, very similar to how branches work in Git. I mean, it is a Git branch under the hood. So developer, if you're using that CLI handoff and they're pulling down, they can pull from multiple branches or use regular Git workflows. It might create some merge conflicts or things, but they can process through those. But obviously within Builder, you'd have the ability to, edit both of those branches distinctly. And then, you can always raise it as a PR, which will merge it into the product. And then, we'll go branch by branch and kind of update and merge those as needed. So, yeah, it basically, however you want to kind of share it across the team and merge it into your product, using the standard Git flows and workflows is how that works. So, um, yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Jeff. So we do have upcoming events. Thank you all so much. Actually, yeah, let me fast forward to one last slide. Thank you so much for attending.
Yes.
Thank you for doing the workshop. It's really fun to see everyone creating branches and different things. So really appreciate it.